why do we feel a need to prove ourselves? It's okay to slow down. It's okay to have an off day. It's okay to not do something. And I don't have to constantly prove myself to everybody because I actually do good work. And so I'm curious to kind of hear your take on it.
Women in general tend to put a lot of pressure on ourselves. Am I good enough for that role? Should I apply for that role? Even though I may be tenfold qualified, we always have a tendency of second guessing our judgments and our own caliber. And so part of my journey with Pink Careers was having to stop doubting myself. When I sit in these meetings and conversations with the C-suite, I am not going, I'm not qualified for this. I shouldn't be here. I understand every single word that's coming out of their mouth. I can translate to what it means. So clearly I've done what I need to do to have a seat on this table and deserve what I need.
You're listening to Fearless Career Moves. I'm your host, Richa Bansal, founder of Pink Careers, award-winning executive career coach, and former Amazon leader, here to help ambitious women ditch imposter syndrome, lead boldly, make more money, and build careers they love on their own terms. Women can have it all, and I'm here to show you how. Let's get into it. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Fearless Career Moves. I am so excited to speak with Nikita Kawdiya today. So Nikita Kawdiya is a product leader, and she was one of our clients inside the Fearless Hire program. And in general, I think Nikita is such a wonderful, wonderful woman. And I'm super excited to kind of bring her story to you and all these wonderful conversations that we've had together in the last year and a half, almost now 2 years, Nikita, that I've known you. So really, really excited to get into all about why really, really amazing, ambitious women downplay themselves, how can we get more comfortable with self-promotion, and all about motherhood and ambition. So super excited to have you on, Nikita. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for such a warm welcome. It always feels very surreal every time I talk to you, and all the memories of the journey that we went together just comes flooding back, and it really just does not feel like it's been 2 years already. So I appreciate the warm welcome and the reconnect again.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, we connected like almost 2 years ago, and at that time I had recently moved back from Australia to the US, right? So tell the listeners a little bit about you and kind of what has been your journey been before we connected a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I mean, oh my God. I moved back to States in 2024. And so and before that, I lived in US. I was in East Coast working for the Fortune 500 and 100 companies, and have been into product leadership for like X number of years. So it's always been, I was one of those women who are very ambitious about her career, wanted to be somewhere before I settled down. So it was great. And then the pandemic happened. Right around the time, I think a year ago, I had met my husband. We had gotten just married, and I decided to pack up my bags from US and move to Australia. And I was still working for my US company at that point because everybody was remote. And during pandemic, I ended up having my son, grew my family, right? It was great. And I was lucky enough to actually also realize that this was the time that was very crucial for me. So I think as a ambitious woman and a career woman, you do try to find that work-life balance all the time. And so I was able to step back and take a sabbatical because I wanted to spend time with my newborn. And it was great. I was able to do a lot of that. So a lot of you get around, you get that crazy thoughts in your head. It's like, what if I take a sabbatical? Will I be able to go back to work now that I'm a mother? Will I get judged? And I navigated through a lot of that in Australia, and I was able to, lucky enough, find another great leader who was also a woman. And she's like, no, you're great. You still talk so passionately about what you do. And I started working there for a year. And then lo and behold, my husband got an opportunity to move to the States. So we were like, all right, let's just pack our bags. And this is another key piece I feel like it's good to talk about, because I was like, he's on his career trajectory, and I wanted to support him. So we were like, no, let's do it. We have a 2.5-year-old. If we don't do this now, it's going to be much harder when he's older. So let's do that now. And we ended up packing our bags and moving back to the States. And And then again, I took time because at that point I was like, okay, I worked for a year. I knew I can go back, which is great. But I want to take some time to settle down because we had a 2.5 year at that point in time. So I took some time off. And I think that's where all those thoughts started coming in of, oh man, do I want to go back to work? I've always been very passionate about what I did, my product management journey, like, building product and building things and applications for the end user. And like I would get a high from when people would use what you built, right? And you get feedback. And so it was the whole thing about, no, I want to keep doing what I'm doing. And I started having conversations about, I want to go back to work. What does that mean? I started circulating my resume that I had, and people were like, what do you want to go back to? And I said, product management, always. And they're like, have you thought about taking a step down? Because now you have a kid. And I said, no, why? Because well, work-life balance, and you're coming back into the market as a new mother. Market might not see that. They might not appreciate. So maybe take a step down and then start again. And I was like, well, no, because I've worked really hard to be where I am. I do not want that to get impacted. It's not a problem. Like, it's not a title thing. It's more about the ambition. And I was thinking of taking a step forward and not necessarily taking a step down. And I said, no, I don't think that that's the right. And that kind of really messed my head. Which is right around the time I think I came and met you.
It is so interesting. Yeah, it's so interesting, right? That like motherhood really changes the whole identity you have as a woman, as a professional. Yeah. I remember back, like now my kids are like 10 and 8. But when I had my first one, at that time I was working full time. I was also doing my MBA full time on the weekends, and I was pregnant with my firstborn. And I remember somebody in the class had asked me, hey, Richa, now that you're expecting a baby, are you planning to take a break from the MBA program? Because, you could take a break and you can kind of start again. I remember them asking me, are you taking a break from the MBA program now that you have a kid? And I remember looking at them and asking, oh, like your wife is pregnant as well, right? And so are you planning to take a break from the MBA program simply because? Yeah. And so I appreciated where they're coming from. The
concern.
The role of the mother is a little bit different from the role of the father, but why does it have to be different, right? Like, I really do think at the end of the day, it's a partnership. And why should women take a step back? I mean, I think there are things that need to be done to enable that support system around you. And that's exactly what I would love to talk about with you a little bit. But, it's really about, okay, how do you really appreciate this shift in identity that has happened? And then really see where you want to go with it, and how do you enable the support around you so that you can keep your ambition instead of that's something that you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I always go back to that clip. I don't know if you've seen it, of Priyanka Chopra talking about the equality, right? And the person asked, well, what do you mean by equality? And she's like, hold on, I'm not talking about physiological, right? I'm talking about cerebral equality, that if I can be a CEO, have a kid, and do a job, right, of a senior leader as a man, why can't a woman do it? And so it always comes back to me when people ask, well, now that you're mother, do you think that you'll work? And I was like, I have a great husband who's ready to support me in my journey. So why wouldn't I? Right? Like, to your point, it's that prioritization, right? Like, which I've spoken to some women as well. And they're like, well, how do you prioritize? And I was like, well, it's kind of like, what's the biggest priority for me? If work is a priority, can my husband step in and take care of some other things, which we communicate. So it's all about communication. Some of the things that you learn as a leader at work as well. It's like a lot of people don't realize that those skills that you've developed at work can actually be used at home as well to kind of find that balance. And it's really just about communication, looking at schedules and saying, what do we need? Where is the deficit in our planning? It does require that level of effort to go to find that balance. And this is, to me, is work-life balance, right? Finding the balance to keep running your household the way you want to and expect to. And what does it mean in terms of the support you need? Do you need extra help? Do you need somebody to come in and cook for you, or do some of the work? Or is it just you finding people who can change some of your priorities at work. So it's always finding that balance. Like if there is a meeting and my husband cannot drop my son off, I look at my calendar first thing in the morning and it's like, I've got a 9 o'clock. Have you got a 9 o'clock? You cannot drop him? Okay, I will move my 9 o'clock. And if it's not important, if it is, then okay, I can't do it. Can he then wait 30 minutes? And can he be late to his daycare 30 minutes? The good thing is he's still very young. So we have that liberty. But a lot of times it really just looks like, I guess it's chicken nuggets tonight because mom and dad both have to work, right? So I think it's really, really trying to build that support system around you without having to give up on your ambition. Because at the end of the day, what you are is what your children are going to see you as. And that was the biggest change for me as a mother, right? Like, yes, a lot of things changed and my son is my top priority and everything. But at the same time, it's how he sees his mom on everyday basis and how she's not only showing up for him and his dad, but how she shows up for herself. And if I cannot at the end of the night go and see, I did everything I could for my growth as well as my son's growth, then I cannot sleep well. So I have to, I find that that's my ground to say this, if I can make peace with whatever happened today and that I gave my 100%, then I'm good. And if not, then what can I change? So it's like a continuous learning around that as well, which I think is really important if you're trying to grow as a leader as well in your professional life.
Yeah, I think there are so many amazing lessons, sort of like nuggets that you shared here. That I want to recap a couple of them here. First thing that you said was really around communication, right? Like, having strong communication with your partner around who is going to come in and step in. I would even say, starting with setting sort of your lanes. I'm sure with me, like in my household, like we have certain lanes that I stay in, and then there are certain lanes that kind of like my husband takes over. And so, the cooking department is kind of like mine, but washing the dishes is his. Or like worrying about kids' sports and extracurricular schedule is kind of mine, but the education and the studies is his. And so just really defining those lanes from the beginning so that you both know kind of what your roles are on the team, and really like thinking about it as a team. And I really do think like beyond your partner, communication can extend and should extend to your immediate team at work as well, because at the end of the day, they're part of your support system and your support team as well. And I remember like when I was having my kiddo and I was doing my MBA, my boss was kind of looped in, and again, like it goes to say the importance of having a good manager, and and having a supportive manager and supported team members who understand like what are the different pieces that are important to you for your personal and professional growth, and they support you in that, right? And so it's important to have a good manager as well who really understands this is what you kind of doing. All right. So Nikita, like a couple of things that you said here, I think it's so important that I want to double click on them and kind of talk about that a little bit more. So you talked about really having the importance of having strong communication with your partner, and really like it's a team, right? Like we are in a team with our partner, and I would even say starting with ensuring that you both have your swim lanes, right? Like there are certain things, like in our household, there are certain things that I am in charge of, like the kids' extracurricular activities, making sure there's food on the table, making sure that kids have the clothes if they're kind of growing out of it. And then there's certain things that my partner is in charge of, where it comes to their education, or maybe they have to learn coding or Python or whatnot. And so they're like certain, or washing dishes. So there's certain like making sure when you have this strong communication with your partner, it really just kind of ensures that you are able to not worry about the mental workload that like goes along with being a mom, right? And that certain things are taken care of because again, you and your partner in a team. But then also I want to say that the piece around communication really extends to your team at work as well. Like having a supportive boss, like a boss who understands what's important to you in terms of your personal professional growth, keeping your boss and immediate team in the loop. If you have to take some time off, maybe because your kiddo is sick, and I mean, it really goes on to say that it is so important to have a boss that is supportive, and it is so difficult to have a boss who is questioning you every move and every time you take time off. So I think communication is really, really key.
Oh, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I mean, I think to that, I would also add to your point of, yes, it's very important to have a supportive leadership, but also the team that you're managing, because you tend to rely on their support as well in getting activities done. And really, I feel like one of the things that we as leaders tend to, or maybe we as new leaders, right? Sometimes new people, if you're stepping into a new leadership role, you're very concerned about not depending and delegating because you're trying to prove yourself. I feel like it's the opposite, right? The more you can depend and delegate to ease some of your work, it also takes you away from the day-to-day stuff and lets you think bigger strategies and stuff. So to your point, I 100% agree of everything that you said, from your partners to your family to people you work with day in and day out. Having a good support system is what helps us rise to the occasion.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think the second thing that you said is really, really critical, is to dish the guilt, right? Like when you are being a mom, then you are being a mom, right? Like you're not being guilty about, oh, I'm not getting like this thing completed at work. And then when you are at work, like be the professional, be the badass professional that you are, and not worry about home. And I think that being that guilt free is so, so important also, to be able to, again, like not lose so much energy in just like worrying about things all the time. I don't know, like if you read Indra Nui's book, where like memoir, like she talks about all about, you know, how she one time like bought like store-bought cookies, and where there was this like baking thing, everybody was supposed to bring in cookies, and she's like, okay, I mean, she's doesn't have time to bake cookies, and she just like gets something like store-bought and decorated and get something store-bought, and it's okay. And if you miss a game or two, I mean, that's okay, as long as when you are attending those games, like you're being really, really present. When you are at home and you're having some of that quality time with your kids, like you're not looking at your phone constantly, which I am guilty of looking at sometimes. And so sometimes that my kiddos are, oh, like you're always on your phone. But I try.
Yeah.
And I think those two things are so important.
And yeah, I mean, that is so true though, right? And I feel like I went through that journey myself, where every time I stepped away from my son, even when I wasn't working, for my sanity, it felt like a massive guilt of, oh my God, am I a bad mother? That I want to think about myself. And it was such a learning curve to realize that. And I was able to put that to my work experience, because I was a workaholic, like always working. And then finding myself that I was starting to burn out. So I think for me, that was such a big shift, even with around the same time as I joined Pink Careers as well, where I started to think like, you know, there's nothing wrong in being selfish. People tend to associate that word negatively, where I want to push back on everybody to go and say, if it brings clarity, if it takes off the fog, and if it helps you to achieve what you're trying to achieve, then yes, we should be selfish about our careers. And to your point that you made, Richa, is so good, that when you have to be 100% present where you are. If you're with your family, that is you being selfish and away from work, and really focusing on spending time with your family and nurturing them, and showing your presence and how you show up as a mother. But at the same time, if I'm letting my son be away from me for an hour, I sure as hell I am going to make sure that I get 1,000% out of that hour, because for me, that's a very big sacrifice. So I started valuing my time on what I was spending from that perspective. And that brought such a change for me, because I was like, if I'm leaving my son with somebody else for that 1.5 hour, I better finish these 3 tasks and get comfortable with whether it was me practicing my source stories, or whether it was me, you know, spending time on writing them, or to your point, getting comfortable with talking about big numbers that I brought to the business. And so that became my anchor, and the support you gave me to say, you gotta start thinking big. And if that meant also balancing out, you know, being okay with away from my son or my family, like that became a big, big point for me to go and say, I'm going to be selfish about it.
Yeah.
I
Like,
have to.
I don't even think it's selfish, right? It's not about being selfish. It's about, how in the every time you take a flight, they tell you to put your oxygen mask first before you put it on
Yeah.
your pillow. I mean, you have to really work on filling your cup up before you can serve anybody. Like before you can be a good mom, a good partner, a good employee or whatnot, you got to fill your cup up first. And so it's, yeah, like you got to be selfish, but it's really not about being selfish. It's about being present for yourself so that you can be present for others. And
So well said.
absolutely, absolutely. And then so that brings us to, like, let's to this other topic that I really wanted to sort of double click on with you, is all around why do we feel a need to prove ourselves, right? Like, and so you talked a little bit about this need to, like, work, because sometimes it also stems from the fact that, hey, like, I need to prove myself that I am capable of these bigger roles, or I'm capable of whatever opportunities that I want to do. And so this whole kind of like need to prove yourself, I'm curious, like, have you found yourself like struggling with it, or when? And if I definitely have, right? Like, and sometimes I have to really consciously remind myself that it's okay to slow down, it's okay to have an off day, it's okay to not do something. And don't have to constantly prove myself to everybody, because I actually do good work. And so I'm curious to kind of hear your take on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a good question, right? Combine that with imposter syndrome of I'm not really good enough, or I'm not. And I feel women in general tend to put a lot of pressure on ourselves. Am I good enough for that role? Should I apply for that role? Even though I may be tenfold qualified, we always have a tendency of second guessing our judgments and our own caliber. And so part of my journey with Pink Careers was having to stop doubting myself. And that started with, if you remember the resume work that we did, right? I was like, I was selling myself short. Well, one, because I let sort of the patriarchal world drive my successes, right? I did let that get to me of, if, I may be bringing $20 million or managing $20 million of a budget on a year-on-year basis, but it was not a big deal. It's not something that you need to be really proud of. Or if you're off that 20 million, if you're producing 2.5x on ROI, so what? Everybody does it. So it was always the doubt in my mind of like, yeah, if I do it, I'm sure everybody else is doing it. Not taking a beat and taking a pause to say, I do not know about others, but I am doing this better than I did last time. So that changed my narrative massively when we started working on my resume and how I was crafting my story and how I was presenting myself as a leader. And I still find those moments or buckets of time to go and say, when I am working these days, where I have a habit of, if I'm drafting an email, and we tend to do this all the time, we apologize for being ourselves. And now I've gotten stopped at the minute I'll write, I'm sorry, I was late. Before I send it, I take a pause and say, am I really sorry? Was I just lacking around? Right? No, I wasn't. I was sitting in another meeting talking about big numbers and big strategies. And then I find myself changing to go and say, no, I appreciate you waiting for me. And so that instantly started also bringing a change in the more I consciously started going, you do not have to apologize for just being, right? Forget about everything else. Why am I apologizing for existing or for being what I am? I'm going to stop doing that. And that I find myself like my shoulders square a little bit more. I'm walking a little bit more straight, right? And it does wonders to your psyche. Because now when I sit in these meetings and conversations with the C-suite, I am not going, I'm not qualified for this. I shouldn't be here. Of course, I understand every single word that's coming out of their mouth. I can translate to what it means. So clearly I've done what I need to do to have a seat on this table and deserve what I need. So it doesn't come easy. Trust me. It's a lot of hard work and constant struggle with what I'm used to and constant battle of, you're not that person who apologizes for being such a great leader or apologizes for being, bringing a lot of changes to the business. It is you, and you're also that same woman who loves going on her knees with her 4-year-old and playing a monkey, right? I think it's just that finding that balance. And it took me a long journey. And part of my journey was I was thankful enough to have that with you.
I remember like still that you when you talked about like how I kept pushing you. This is not big enough. It's not big enough. Maybe share a little bit of that story with the listeners. I think they would love to hear that from you.
Yeah, I was working.
Hated me. I was like, oh my God, this Richa keeps asking me. This is not big enough.
Exactly. And I was frustrated, right? Because I was talking about, and to give the listeners a little bit of background, I was doing really class work. I was working for Prudential. I was, running their mobile app, built it from scratch, took all the negative feedback. So I was doing a lot of great work. I was managing big budgets. And then I come to Pinker. So all of my resume talked about what I was doing, but not necessarily translating it to show that I was a leader. It was like more defined as a task that I did. Oh, I launched the app. I built the app, and it took us 18 months to get to 1 million user, or I was coordinating and cross-functioning leaders, or I was presenting to leadership. It was more tactical, not necessarily showing the results that I drove. And so my first conversation with you were like, this is great. Let's change the tone. And did you bring any money to the table? And I had to think back, and I was like, yeah, well, I grew 1 million users. And you said, this is great. But what does 1 million user mean to the business? And so you pushed me to say, Nick, I want you to go back and think about the things. I think I still have that video, that our first feedback that you gave me. And I often find myself going back to that for clarity's sake. And I did the work. I came back, and it was numbers. I was like, okay, I can live with those numbers. These are great numbers. And I thought I did a great job at that resume. And you take a look at it, and then you come back to me in our regular review sessions to say, these are not big enough. You were working for a Fortune 100 company. Are you telling me you only did 10 million? And I said, I remember going back and telling you, what do you mean? 10 million is a big number. And she said, yes, but you're also saying that you ran a team of 8 product managers. So are you telling me that that was your throughput and pull through in terms of the work that you did? Because that doesn't make sense. That doesn't math. And I can tell you, if you sit in an interview talking about these numbers, people are not going to trust you that you were able to do something, that you own that seat on the table of being a director of product management. And I got really frustrated. I said, this woman, like, I don't know. Why? What does she want me to do? So I sat down on my computer with my AIs and said, tell me the crazy numbers, right? And I had numbers from my year-end reviews, the revenue that I drove, the changes I brought in terms of the ratings or the ROAs, base points that we ended up increasing to the business. And I said, here's the numbers. Let's talk about how I can build that strategy. And I remember part of that course was you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be exact amount, but you need to know what you're working against. You need to be comfortable talking about those numbers. So I said, you know what? Great. I'm going to do like big numbers now. Let's see what she says. And all you came back to me with that after that was like, this is exactly what I was looking for. That it shows that what you drove actually had an impact to the business. And at that point, I kid you not, I sat down and I said, this is crazy. How am I going to speak to those numbers with confidence? Because I was not used to talking about the work that I did have an impact in terms of money. And so money is such a big taboo, right? Even in so many cultures where we don't talk about our salaries, we do not talk about how much we're making or what we're bringing to the business because it's rude and you don't want to show off. But to that, I say, do show off because that brings transparency, that brings comfortability. And again, if you're sitting at a leadership position, you need to be comfortable talking about big budgets and big numbers and owning, to the word, in the words of Richa, owning what you build and what you produce. So that was my journey in getting comfortable with the numbers and really getting over the imposter syndrome of maybe I'm not good enough.
I think this story really, really touches the heart of the work that needs to happen. Like you talked about, women are so comfortable in the doing and talking about the doing as opposed to talking about the impact on business in terms of dollar numbers. And you were so comfortable talking about, oh, so I brought on 1 million users. And coordinated amongst global teams, and I led a team of 8 product managers. As soon as it came to numbers, okay, so what is the big numbers? What are the big business impact that we brought? Like, it's not just you, like it's like a struggle that I hear over and over and over again from amazing women who are leading big teams and doing great work. And just talking about 1 million users is still in the doing. We're talking about 20 million, 30 million, $50 million of impact. Hard revenue, hard cash that you brought for the business is really the piece that we all struggle with. And as you said, I think so many cultures just talking about money is still a taboo. Just like, why can we not talk about money? Like in my household as well. I mean, even to date, I have only a fuzzy idea of what my parents make back in India, right? And it's only I think I learned it from one of my mentors that it's okay to talk about money. I remember, in fact, the first time I had gotten a promotion, this was an internal promotion, and I had no clue what the role would pay, because in our company, when I worked for Schlumberger, at least at the time, everything was like a black box, right? The moves were a black box. You didn't know which role you were going to get to. You didn't really know what the roles made. Numbers were not really published outside, like tech industry, the roles and the numbers and the salary ranges are more public. But I mean, in the oil and gas industry, everything is still kind of like very hush hush. And so I had like no clue. And I remember one time, like one of my mentors whose role I stepped into, she basically shared with me that this is the like small band of what I make, like narrow band of what I make. And also you can figure out what others make by asking them directly what they make. And we said, oh, you could do that? You can ask others what they make and they would actually share what they make. And after that, I remember like I actually asked people, and we started asking, like we at least started having these discussions with our close cousins and, talking about what we make, what they could be doing differently with investments, how much investments we have. We start talking about that with friends. The more you talk about numbers, what you make, investments with your friends, family, eventually with your kids, the more you are normalizing the conversation about money and being able to talk about money.
Yeah, and the more you learn, right? Because a lot of times, like I'll give you a class example of when I accepted the offer and you and I were talking about negotiating, and how it's not always just a salary. You have so much room to negotiate. And I remember, you and I aligning on the numbers and going saying this is the right, but we could push for a little bit more. And I did, right? And we got to the number that I felt comfortable and happy with. I remember within a month of my joining at work, we were also hiring for my team, some of the members from my team, but also one of my peers in the same organization. And I was part of the conversation with, talking about what that range was. And I just assumed that it's the same range, right? Because it's the same leadership position. And what, without divulging too much information, what we went back with on that offer and what she accepted. And in my head, I'm going, oh boy, am I glad that I did not say yes to the first number that they came and told me to. And I took the time to say, thank you, I really appreciate it. I was ready to jump on that number because it was part of what I was expecting would come in. But taking that pause and saying, let me try. And in between like that negotiation window that I went through, I was panicking. I was like, can they rescind the offer if I am going too high? Or can this happen? And I remember texting you as well, right? Back and forth on, do you think that these are the scenarios? Like, do I have a backup option? Not in that. And then moving forward a month to seeing what the other person did, the classical, and she's a great leader. She is one of my closest ally at work at this point. And I kind of wanted to shake her and go and say, don't accept it. Push back, negotiate, because there is space that you can grow in. And so learning, or having a simple conversation of, with my son going and saying, here's your pocket money. He doesn't care. He gets happy when he gets a penny, right? It doesn't matter. But then letting him sometimes go back and say, okay, here, this is yours. You decide how you want to spend. But at the same time, know that whatever you pick has to be within that range. So just having different conversations and getting comfortable talking about money is something that I have learned is so, so important. And it eventually, whether you realize it or not, it starts to align with your self-worth on how you see yourself and how worthy do you think you're not. Because we do live in a capitalistic world that does revolve around money conversations, whether it's happening in the closed doors or whether it's happening in the open. And I feel like we as women tend to shy away from having those conversations because we do not, we're in that constant struggle of we have to be strong enough, but you cannot be too pushy because then you get judged as, being too aggressive. You have to be direct, but you cannot be too direct because you have to hold back and you do not want to hurt other people's pride. The same thing happens with money as well, I feel. And so if you talk about money, it's like, oh, and it's like, why do I not want to talk about that money? I earned it. I am working hard for it. Right? So why not? And now I used to be that as well, who would shy away and not talk about salary. To your point, Richa, to this date, I did not know how much my dad made, to a point that sometimes my mother didn't know. She knew the salary was coming in, but she didn't know exact number. And so I was like, no, we're going to change that conversation. So now if somebody reaches out to me and talks to me about, oh, do you mind sharing how much you're making? I'd openly have that conversation to say, yeah, sure. I don't mind telling people what I'm making. It just, I want to make sure they don't take it the wrong way.
Absolutely. And I really do think, as you said, right, once women start owning their self-worth and once we start learning how to be comfortable with self-promotion, once we learn how to be comfortable with talking about money, we're not just changing our trajectory, we are changing the trajectory, like the career and life trajectory of those around us, of those who come after us. Like you wanted to stop that woman from like not negotiating, we are changing the direction of what our kids will know and learn about how to talk about money or not, right? And so it really changes like not just our life, but so many beyond. And in that, I really do think it's so important to be part of that community, to be part of a group where you are able to learn from others, and then you are also able to kind of share what you're learning with them. So again, as you are learning and as you are growing, you're changing, like the whole with so many around you, not just you.
Yeah, somebody I think once said that, a woman has the power to not only change herself, her house, but anybody who is associated by 6 degrees, I think, that we have that power to bring about that change because we tend to realize that, oh, if I could do it, like I want to make sure my friends or, the women who are in that same spot as me. And I find that myself as well. I think once I was on the other side, I remember when you asked me to do, a success story, I was like, yes, let me talk about my challenges, but also the support I got from the community that I was working with. And they were amazing people. Like, I think the cohort that I was part of, selfishly so, I think that was one of the best cohorts. And I think every cohort feels that way. But the support I got every time I had a moment of doubt, being vulnerable enough to rely on them to go and say, this is how I'm feeling, I don't know. And then getting the responses back from them. So every time now somebody reaches out to me, I was like, I will make it a point to help another woman who finds herself in the same boat. And it is so important to do that because, to your point, there is a leader in every single woman that's out there. We do it day in and day out without knowing. I think it's just bringing that knowledge forward and bringing it to our consciousness.
Absolutely. I think there's a leader in each one of us. And I think the conversation that we had today was so powerful. Thank you for sharing your journey on how you found the courage to talk about the big impact that you create on a daily basis with others and the struggle that you had to overcome in being able to do that. I think that's such a great example for everybody. So we can go on and talk forever. I am sure, but you got to return to work. And so where can people find you, and if they want to connect with you, and where can they do that?
Yeah, I'm trying to be very, very active on LinkedIn as well, especially because I have, women reached out to me and it's like, we saw your note, we read about your success story at LinkedIn. We'd love to connect with you. So find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. It's my first name and the last name, Nikita Kawdiya, at LinkedIn. And if you ever want to chat, like, I feel like that is so important to keep the conversation going. And it's my way of repaying forward to the community, right? What I learned and the support I got, I always want to make sure that people are able to get to it as well. And whether it's answering their questions if they're trying to get into the program, navigating or talking about being a young parent, I'm always there to help.
Amazing. I will put your LinkedIn in the show notes as well for anybody who wants to check it out. And I really appreciated our conversation today. Thank you so much.
Yes,
thank you
likewise.
Podcast.
Yeah, I am so glad we did this. So thank you for inviting me.
That's it for today's episode of Fearless Career Moves. If this resonated with you, be sure to leave us a review and subscribe so you never miss what's next, and share it with a woman who's ready to make her next fearless move. And if you are ready to take your career to the next level, make sure to check out The Fearless Hire, my signature career accelerator for ambitious women just like you. You can learn more at www.pinkcareers.com. Until next time, stay fearless.